So, as Sonia says, they're dealing with a third wave of this pandemic in Hong Kong, but there's still great concern about the so called second wave in Spain. And one former Regina resident is dealing with that as well.
Playas en todo el término municipal. Los desplazamientos quedan limitados a motivos estrictamente laborales, médicos y a la adquisición de productos.
This is what Stacey Ferguson, formerly of Regina, was regularly seeing and hearing in her neighborhood during that lockdown in Spain. The streets were virtually empty as Spain saw among the highest cases of COVID in the world. But what was noticeable on the streets? The military and police presence. Stacey moved to Spain with her husband in March of 2019. That country now has more than 350,000 reported COVID cases, and people are now facing more closures, more restrictions. And Stacey joins us from her home in Spain. Hi there, Stacey.
Hi, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. That's quite the fashionable mask you have for us. What's the story behind that?
Actually, one of my employees bought it for me because I'm the queen, so I just thought it was apropos.
Well, and I'm glad you did. You put that on for us. Now, I think you're okay not wearing a mask in your home, and we see that.
Yeah.
But the mask thing has become a big issue in Spain. There were protests today, anti-maskers, for example. What's the attitude of Spaniards towards wearing masks in public?
Spaniards are fantastic people. They don't. How do you put that? They just don't take everything that's being told to them. They want facts and they want it to be proven. So we're living in a country that is 45 degrees in the afternoon, and you're being told that you have to wear a mask. For a while during lockdown, we had to wear masks in the car when we were driving. Now we don't. We're allowed to take them off in the car. But it's quite difficult. It's socially difficult, but it's also difficult to breathe in. It's really hot. You soak up all of the sweat on your face, so you end up being wet all the time. It's really quite gross.
So when Spain was hit with one of the strictest lockdowns in Europe because of the high cases of COVID, what has this pandemic done to your life there?
A lot, actually. It's affected a lot of people. And if you look at the numbers in Spain, they were higher in Barcelona and Madrid because they're high density population areas. Where we were mostly untouched. However, the rules were so extreme and draconian that March 14th, we found out about noon, the rumors started coming out that we were going to be forced to close, and everybody thought, oh, no, that can't happen. And by midnight, they closed most places. So instantly, nobody had any time to get income, resources, anything like that. We were told it was for 2 weeks initially. So not too much panic set in, but people started getting broke really quickly. Well, we ended up in full lockdown until the middle of June. It was difficult, very difficult. There's a lot of economic despair.
I want to follow up on the time during the peak closure, during the peak restrictions in Spain. We saw scenes, and you sent us photos of the military on the street, for example, tanks and armed guards. What was that like for you?
Well, it's twofold because it's scary at the same time because I'm Canadian. So we're just used to the RCMP on horses, and the police are good people that you call it. And the police are here as well. But we're not used to seeing big tanks roll down the streets. And I mean, there's no, when you go through, generally they were at a roundabout so that they could control traffic, and they would stop and interview you and say, where are you going? I had to give my husband a form stating that he was allowed to be in the vehicle, because if you weren't, you were going to jail or you were getting a giant fine.
And how does that make you feel, being in Spain versus, say, being in Saskatchewan where you used to live?
Well, we chose Spain for many reasons, and this is a really wonderful place to live. And especially at my age, my advanced age, it's a really good place to be. We felt quite safe. We still do. We had and still have absolutely almost nothing for COVID in our region. Despite it, there's been a little bit of increase because of tourism. Most of the problems in Spain right now is because of the migrant workers that are coming in from uh, different regions that aren't as safe as Spain. We also all live in my region, for the most part, people live in single family homes. And that has changed. I think that changes the dynamic from Barcelona and Madrid, where they have multi generational families living in multi high rises. And so when one person walks by that it might be sick, it could infect 20 people.
Tell me something. We know the Spaniards are people. They like to hug, they kiss, they're very social people. They're in cafes and bars. What's it like physical distancing in your part of the world?
The physical distancing isn't so bad. That hasn't been as catastrophic as you would think it might be. We were required to put 1.5 meters between tables. Spaniards have taken to elbow in each other rather than shaking hands or the double kissing or whatever. You still see some hugging and whatnot, but Spanish life, that is what is the allure of this country. It's a coffee culture, it's a cafe culture, and they are very big into their families. Like Saturday nights is an amazing thing. You go into the square in town, and everybody from the 6 months old to the 82-year-old, they're all there together. They're sharing food, they're sharing wine. So the social distancing is a little bit difficult. But even on the beaches, we're seeing, like, we go and they'll have a group, and they really do keep apart. And even in the water, there's like little pockets of people who are all standing in the water. So they've done pretty well with that.
Well, that's good to hear. I want to ask you about Saskatchewan. I mean, you've spent a part of your life in Saskatchewan. What thoughts do you have? All of it. So what thoughts do you have about what does the pandemic look like to you in Saskatchewan from where you sit in Spain?
Well, unfortunately for me, all of my children are in Saskatchewan. So I'm in contact with them every couple of days. And so I hear what's going on. To be honest with you, it seems like a much ado about nothing. And that might be the wrong thing to say, but it doesn't seem to be that it's the worst thing, that they've shut a fair amount of things down. And there's a lot of services that aren't happening. And that concerns me. It concerns me here. Spain has some of the best healthcare in the world, and they've reduced that on the thought that COVID might get worse, but our hospitals for the most part are empty. So as far as Saskatchewan goes, I don't have any friends that have COVID or colleagues or anything like that. My best friend's son tragically took his life. That is the biggest cost, I think, to me with COVID there, because he had trouble dealing with the repercussions of lockdown and not going to school and the social issues. And for me, that's been the biggest cost, honestly.
Well, Stacey, we really appreciate your perspective from Spain. Wishing you and your family all the best, and thanks for talking with us.
Thank you. Have a good night.